Hey, welcome back to U.S. History. We're going to pick up with Roman numeral II, War Erupts, and this is on page 455 of your textbook. And we left off with Adolf Hitler and Germany beginning to break the Treaty of Versailles. We said that Adolf Hitler first broke the treaty by taking the Rhineland, which was land in between France and Germany. Well, he begins to continue to expand, even though this breaks the portions of the Treaty of Versailles. But since no one protested Hitler taking the Rhineland, he also demanded that he be able to unite Germany with Austria. This uniting of Germany and Austria was called Anschluss, or Anschluss, depending on the terminology. And so Germany absorbed Austria. And we call this, like I said, Anschluss, the joining of Germany and Austria. And no one protested the joining of these two countries. And so Hitler said, well, if nobody is protesting this, I'm just going to keep going. So he then said that he wanted this area of land called the Sudetenland. And Sudetenland was an area in between Czechoslovakia and Germany. And so people said, okay, fine, you can have the Sudetenland. So he was able to absorb the Sudetenland into the German Empire. But then he even went a step further. And he said, you know what? He goes, there's also a bunch of German-speaking people that are in Czechoslovakia that want to be a part of the fatherland, Deutschland. And this is an interesting piece of information. Germany is one of the only countries that refers to itself as the fatherland. If you commonly hear the term motherland, referring to your home nation in the female form, but Germany is the only country that refers to it in the male form as the fatherland. And so he said, I want Czechoslovakia. Well, this really woke up European leaders to where they held a meeting in Munich, Germany, where Neville Chamberlain, who is the Prime Minister of England, he went there with other foreign leaders to talk with Hitler, and he said, listen, once I get Czechoslovakia, that's it. Okay, I'm done. And Neville Chamberlain said, you know, I hope to prevent warfare or confrontation with Hitler, so we're just going to give him Czechoslovakia. And so Neville Chamberlain, he practiced this foreign policy called appeasement, saying if we appease him, hopefully we won't have physical conflict with Germany. Well, this policy of appeasement would turn out to be a disaster, because everyone now knows, and we have the gift of looking back and the gift of history, being able to study this. Hitler had no intention of being told no whenever he was asking for these countries. If he was not going to get these countries peacefully, he had already given the orders to his army saying, invade Czechoslovakia if they don't give it to us in Munich. Well, Neville Chamberlain agreed with Hitler. He said, okay, we're going to give you Czechoslovakia and then you'll be appeased, right? And Hitler said, yes, absolutely. He said, this is the last territorial demand that I have in Europe. Well, Neville Chamberlain is quoted as he stepped off the plane in England. He told the people there, we have achieved peace in our time. That turned out to be the most ridiculous statement made in that era, because now we know that there was no way that there was going to be peace in their time, because Hitler would soon invade Poland against the demands of other foreign countries. So Neville Chamberlain, you need to know, he was the Prime Minister of England during this time, and he practiced the foreign policy of appeasement, which did not work. Now, Hitler learned later on, he said, listen, to his men, he said, we do not need to fight wars on two fronts. And so when we look at the textbook here, let's see if I can find a map. So he said, we don't want to fight wars on two fronts. He said, we don't want to fight it in the east and we don't want to fight it in the west. And so Hitler was able to sign a non-aggression pact or a treaty with Russia. And basically he was saying, if we don't fight you, you don't have to fight us. Okay, we'll be allies. And they weren't necessarily helping each other out militarily just yet, but they were saying, we want to attack you, you don't attack us. So here's Czechoslovakia, here's Austria. Okay, and so these were the two territories that were given to Germany right here. Now, Germany is going to set their eyes on Poland, okay, and they are going to eventually invade Poland. But at this point in time, Germany now has control of Austria, Czechoslovakia, and has signed a non-aggression pact with Russia. This leaves Germany to be able to completely focus on the Western Front right here. They now only have to focus on one region in this war that's about to start. So you do need to know that they signed a peace treaty with Russia, even though the Russians were communists and Hitler hated communists. This is going to come back up later when Hitler decides to invade Russia. Now, Germany threatened to invade Poland against the warnings of the rest of Europe. England and France had told Germany, they told Hitler, if you invade Poland, we will declare war and come to Poland's aid. Well, Germany invaded on September 1st, 1939, and they used this form of warfare called Blitzkrieg, which means lightning war. And Blitzkrieg really uses tanks to its advantage. Germany, they perfected the tank, especially with their types of tanks that we call Panzer tanks. And so he was able to just roll right on into Poland. There was barely even a fight in Poland at this time, and it quickly fell to Germany. So now that Germany has control of Poland, they don't need to worry about the East at all. Now they just need to focus on the West, and the country that falls directly west of Germany here is France. Now France, they had set up this defense line called the Maginot Line, where they had set all of these anti-aircraft and anti-tank guns. But what we see here is that they were taking a defensive stance. They were not willing to be on the attack with Germany. They were going to fight a defensive war, which really put them in an awful position. Now, what history tells us is that Hitler was not actually ready for a full-scale war. He was really hoping that using Blitzkrieg would really help countries fall under his control quickly, because he was not prepared for a full-scale war that would drag out at the time. And he was hoping that countries would not call his bluff. Because if the United Kingdom and France were willing to be aggressive right away, then they might actually stand a chance against the German army. But they did not call his bluff. And France, fighting a defensive war, had to give in to Germany. We see that Germany invades France. They cross the Maginot Line easily. But the one problem that Germany had, is that tanks that travel much faster than foot soldiers. And so the tanks began working their way into France and into northern France much faster than the foot soldiers. And so there was a scary moment in time for Germany where their army was way behind their group of tanks that were taking part in Blitzkrieg. But they were able to catch up at some point, and it proved to be a success where they were able to take over France. And that brings us to the miracle at Dunkirk. You may have seen the movie Dunkirk. I thought it was a good movie. Had a great storyline here with the miracle of Dunkirk. So England had sent soldiers into France. And let me see if I can find a map with Dunkirk on it. Here we go. All right, so you can see here on this map, here is Dunkirk, right here at the northern portion, right next to the English Channel. Well, the Nazis had already taken Paris, and they began to move their way north toward Dunkirk. The English had thousands of soldiers that were here in the northern portion near Dunkirk. And so what they were able to do, they called upon all types of ships that were on the coastline in England, and they said, "We need your help. Our Navy can't transport all of these soldiers in time before the Germans get here, and we need to transport all of these thousands of soldiers back to England." And so there were fishing vessels, there were yachts, there were sporting boats that they answered the call of their country. And so these English boats, they began crossing the English Channel to transport these soldiers back to England, which is a huge, I think, encouragement to us. That anytime our country calls or needs us to take part in something, especially to save the lives of our countrymen, we can answer the call. And so these were average Englishmen who answered the call by taking their boats across the English Channel, putting themselves in danger, because the Luftwaffe at this point was going to try to conduct raids over the English Channel. They were going to put themselves in danger by transporting these men back across the English Channel to England. But after a period of time, a very short period of time, they were able to transport these men back across the English Channel. This was, in fact, I don't remember the exact statistics of the miracle at Dunkirk, but I do know that it is one of the largest evacuations done in history, and the amount of time that they were able to complete it was quite amazing. So that is the miracle at Dunkirk. When the Germans finally got to Dunkirk, what they found was just equipment and all of this artillery laying there, but they didn't find any English soldiers. All of the soldiers had been transported back to England. That brings us to the Battle of Britain. I've already mentioned the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force led by Hermann Goering. He was in charge of the Luftwaffe. So the German Air Force, they planned an assault on England, which was called Operation Sea Lion. And their goal was to bomb England into submission. Now, I want you to understand that England has not been successfully conquered since William of Orange, dating back to, I think it was 1066 in the Battle of Hastings, all the way back to 1066. Okay, this is in the 1940s, and I think that the Battle of Britain took place, in 1940. So this is over. England has not been successfully conquered or invaded in over 900 years. But Germany is going to attempt to be the first since 1066 to conquer England and force its people into submission. Well, their plan was just by the use of the Luftwaffe in bombing England, instead of actually trying a naval assault and transporting soldiers across the English Channel. And what they did not know is that England had the RAF, the Royal Air Force, in that the RAF had a tool that had not been used before, and it was a new invention. It was called radar. And so because the RAF had radar, they were able to detect when the Luftwaffe was crossing the English Channel to attack England. Now, I'm going to stop this lecture right here. This is part 1. You need to go ahead and click on part 2 to get the rest of this lecture.